being told. Just wanted to make sure everybody had seen any amendments that they had ordered. And if not, you'll have another opportunity to offer amendments on Tuesday when we resume working the bill. I'd like to welcome Representative Wynn to Commerce Committee. This is the first time I think she's been. Have you ever been on Commerce Committee before? Many years ago. Probably before I was born. My apologies. It just came out. Before we start the hearing, yes, Representative Wynn, you can fire back. Keep your powder dry. Representative Miller.
Speaking of born, that's a nice segue to the fact we have a member with a birthday today. Oh, right here.
Jesse Bourgeon, happy birthday. We're going to go ahead. I made an announcement at the well today that an agenda change. The acting secretary, Madam Secretary Schultz, wanted to address the committee and introduce herself. And so we'll go ahead and turn it over to her, and then we'll take a few questions and then move on to opening the working of the bill. Madam Secretary, welcome to Commerce Committee.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. I wanted to take just a few minutes of your time, so I appreciate the Chairman allowing me to do that. To introduce myself, so I am Amber Schultz. I am the Acting Secretary of Labor. I was announced just over 2 weeks ago, so this is week 3 for me. Just a little bit of background about me. I have been privileged to be a public servant for just over 25 years, primarily in local government. During that time, I focused my career on technology and innovation initiatives. I've overseen many projects specifically related to programs, data, analytics, asset management, and those related support systems. Prior to coming to KDOL, I was the general manager for the City of Lawrence Municipal and Services and Operations Department, where we initiated a number of technology innovation programs. And then before that, I was the Deputy Director of Public Works here in the city of Topeka, and then Assistant IT Director for Jackson County, Missouri. So I've earned both my graduate and undergraduate degrees at KU, so proud Jayhawk. And I am very humbled to be asked to lead this agency in such unprecedented times, and I truly look forward to working with you all. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and we look forward, this committee looks forward to working with you going forward. How long ago did you work in Jackson County? Was it Jackson County, Missouri, or Jackson County, Kansas?
Jackson County, Missouri. So I was there from 2010 to 2015.
I have a brother that's a Jackson County legislator, so.
I wanted to ask you if Dan was your brother. So yeah, I worked closely with him. We had a great relationship.
He is my brother, and it's a very good example on how Democrats and Republicans can live in the same house and get along. However, I usually win those arguments and the fights. Are there any questions for the Secretary? Well, Madam Secretary, it looks like they're going to take it easy on you today.
I appreciate that.
I do have one concern, and I think it's shared with most of the people on the committee, if not all. There have been, we continue to receive emails from people that are having difficulty getting in the phone lines. And I know you've only been there for a couple of weeks, but we're pretty far into this thing. And, listening to some of their stories, it's pretty gut-wrenching. And so can you address the committee a little bit on what the plan is to open up more phone lines and what it is you need from us to do that immediately?
Sure. Deputy Secretaries Peter Brady and Brett Flash Barth, please jump in at any time. So, you know, I am a parent. You know, I have friends and family that are experiencing the same difficulties getting through to our call center. And I can certainly tell you, we hear you loud and clear and we empathize. We're working with our partners at Accenture to bring on more resources to answer those phones, but more importantly, get those questions answered. As you probably have come to realize, unemployment insurance and the new and extended programs that have come down from the federal government are extremely complicated. So I wish that we could just, you know, put out a wide net and call people in to help us answer those questions, but it does take training and a little bit of time. And, you know, we're kind of in the middle of a perfect storm right here. With, you know, the 1099s and the new or the extension PUC coming out. So we are working very hard to get those additional resources out on our call center.
So I think one of the main frustrations is that they're not answering the phone. Not that they don't have the right answers, but possibly we could beef up the phone lines if only to take their information and have somebody with the knowledge to call them back. It would make a big difference, I think, to someone that's in dire need to at least be able to talk to somebody on the other line. And it's just that we keep hearing, you know, I talked to a gentleman the other day that literally says he calls 500 times a day. He got a message back. I think Peter was working with him. He got a message back that everything was handled for him, but nobody ever talked to him. But we did send a sheriff to his house with a tax warrant for $172 and threatened to sell his assets. But we haven't paid him any unemployment insurance. So it's stories like that just, it can't happen. And so if there's anything this committee can do to help just at least answer the call and listen to these people, let us know.
I understand. Thank you.
Representative Mason and Sutton have questions now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, you may not know the answer to this, so a subordinate's answer would be fine. 3 weeks ago, you instituted the KDOL helpline, which was a direct connection for legislators to contact the KDOL and report issues with constituents. So I did that. I had one specific contact. It was a female, and so I immediately turned around and forwarded that to the KDOL helpline. About 10 days later, I got an email from KDOL saying that the issue had been resolved, to my great relief. And then about a day or two later, the woman contacted me again and said that KDOL had left a voice message and had not since called back. So I'm wondering what might have happened there. Did you understand my timeline?
Certainly, I definitely understand. I'd be glad to follow up offline so we could get some more information for the claimant that you're talking about so we can follow back up.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nice to meet you, Madam Secretary. Welcome to the job. Well, actually, this may be a couple of questions. First off, who is OCTA? OKTA?
Representative, that's a great question. We try not to refer to that system by name, but OCTA is our multi-authentication system that we placed at the beginning of the month.
Okay, so the security, and that makes sense. Now, if they're not able to actually help claimants who are having trouble with the authentication, are they?
No, they are not.
Okay.
I think, though, Representative, if I may, so there's another piece of software that's the identity verification software. And if they fail that online, they're provided a phone number for that vendor to help them verify their identity.
And is that vendor allowed to help them verify their identity?
Yes.
Because I'm getting a different signal from one of the users, and that's why I was asking. They were saying that that entity wasn't able to help them or was actually forbidden to help them through the process. And you can see where that would be frustrating since nobody answers at KDOL. And so this person was pretty distressed right about that. I took that call. That was a lovely one. But I don't think I'm alone in getting these calls and taking these calls. And I'm just not certain that disallowing anyone from helping is a good idea right now. But that's entirely up to you and security. I'll leave that in your hands.
Representative, just a quick follow-up on that. The Okta, the multi-factor authentication, they don't have the bandwidth or the capacity. That's not actually a service that they offer. But the other company for the identity verification, that is part of the services that we offer, and we're taking full advantage of that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Auerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, couple quick questions. Your weekly reviews that are on, I would imagine it's the Department of Labor website, takes a little bit to get to it, but they're fantastic, a lot of great data. And looking at the one from last week, I think ending in 2/13, a couple things kind of stuck out that are good, I think. One, the trust fund balance seems to be stopping the decline, that it was on path to hit to zero, but it looks like it's stopped going down and kind of stabilized, may have just gone up a little bit. But also taking a look at the regular unemployment insurance payouts. Imagine that's a weekly payout. The preliminary was $6,729,000. The prior week was, I think, a little bit closer to a little under 1 million. The prior week was around 3-point-something million, a little under 4 million. That may have been the week that the system got shut down. But the previous 5 weeks were 45, 41, 35, 31, and 30. And those are rough numbers in the graph and trying to remember what I saw yesterday. So we're seeing those large $30 to $45 million payouts per week from the regular unemployment insurance payments drop down to 4, a little under 1, and now 6.8. What do you see going forward? Do you see us maintaining that similar level to the 6.8 or at least the next few weeks? Or can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing maybe the payouts be for the next few weeks?
Representative, if you don't mind, I'm going to pass that question on to Deputy Secretary Peter Brady, since he kind of has a, since I'm on week 3, a better idea of some of the trends.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary and Representative. That's a really good question. And to your point, those are great data sources to look at. I think what your question is getting at is, what do we anticipate the average payout being as we move forward, as we've seen it fluctuate pretty substantially over the last few months. And I will be honest and say, I don't think we have enough post-Okta data to confidently speak to that. It's clear that we're in a lower payout right now. There's many reasons that could explain that. One of the reasons is we've implemented Okta. We've stopped a lot of fraud that could potentially be occurring, but there's also a lot of other factors. There's users that may have expired on the regular UI program and would be transitioning to a federal program such as PEUC. There are many instances in which we see winter layoffs in certain industries where workers could be getting called back or more layoffs occurring. So there's still a lot of fluctuation. I wouldn't be comfortable saying that you could draw a pattern or a trend line yet, just because I don't think we have enough weeks worth of data to have confidence in that answer. But certainly something we will continue to look at each week as we publish those numbers.
Clayton.
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to formally welcome the secretary to the committee and really thank you for all that you do. I wonder about someone who takes on this type of a job, but I sure do like them. I admire your initiative and, just want to convey respect and gratitude from us for your being here today and for all that you do.
Yes, Madam Secretary, and I can speak for the entire committee that we wish you nothing but success, because without your success, we can't be successful either. So whatever we can do to help, just let us know, and our door is always open. With that, we'll move on to it. Seeing no further questions, any other questions, any online? Okay. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Committee, the Department of Labor is going to remain online as we proceed through our discussions. Just not to weigh in on amendments, but if there are any questions that we need to ask them, they'll be available to answer whatever questions we might have. With that, I'll open discussion on House Bill 2196. Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we pass out HB 2196 favorable for passage.
Seconded by Representative Carpenter. Committee, you've heard the motion, and we'll open it for discussion. Is there any discussion or amendments? Representative Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment. I don't know if it's been distributed yet, but it's pretty simple. I can explain it while that happens.
Charles, have you sent the amendment to Cindy to circulate?
Yes, Chairman, I have.
Okay, and then can you also put it up on the screen? Anybody needed more time to pull up the amendment? Representative Shu, you want to explain your amendment, or do you want the reviser to do so?
I can do it. It's pretty simple. It just strikes the IT portions in subsections C and D on pages 5 and 6. My thinking has actually evolved a little bit throughout this whole process. At first, I was worried about inflexibility, but with a kind of a short-term modernization committee, that's actually fine. For me, it's mostly just pure security at this point, and maybe a little bit of issue with potential. Maybe some of these things only a couple people in the nation are able to do, and I don't want to mandate in statute that we look at certain people for certain jobs. And so mostly it's an IT security issue. I don't think it's a good practice to explicitly say in statute what our system is going to have. And so that is why I'm bringing this amendment.
Amendment is seconded by Representative Clayton. Any discussion? On your screen, it's right there. Any discussion? Still waiting?
Mr. Chairman, this is Pam Curtis.
Representative Curtis?
I'm just having difficulty finding the amendment in my inbox. I see that I've gotten some other amendments. So could you tell me what perhaps the subject line is so I can find it?
I don't know that we've received it.
Okay. I see other amendments have come to me, but not this one. Thank you.
Chairman, I'm sorry, maybe my audio went out, but I did not hear what amendment you're on at the moment.
We were on Representative Shu amendment that you showed us on your screen.
Okay, very good. I wasn't sure if you had moved on to a different one and I didn't hear it. Sorry.
Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Shu, does this include on page 5 the number 1 at the bottom of the page as well, or just everything on page 6?
Thank you, Representative. It strikes everything under subsection D and subsection D, or C and D on 5 and 6.
So line 39 from there on is struck. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, Representative, from line 39 on page 5 into line 36 on page 6.
Thank you. Representative Shu, would you explain the reasoning one more time for me?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Representative Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's mostly for security reasons. In general, I believe it is not best practice to write IT requirements explicitly into statute. And so my concern is if, somebody's out there Googling state of Kansas, results-driven customer empowerment or what any of these things, our statute book would be the first thing that shows up and they'll see exactly what we have in our systems. And so I'm just worried about for the security of our system that it's probably not the best idea to write IT requirements into statute. I don't disapprove of any particular thing in here. I think they're all good ideas to examine. I just don't feel comfortable writing it into statute.
And may I ask, how are we going to know that these are covered within the system that is developed? How are we going to know that?
My opinion is I trust the will of the committee to be the ones to make those recommendations, what are necessary in the system, what isn't.
Thank you, Representative.
Any other comments, Representative Probst?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I understand. If I read this correctly, even if we strike all of this language, it looks like that next paragraph, starting on line 37 on page 6, provides enough guidance and requirement on technology and how it folds in with U.S. Department of Labor. I would feel comfortable that that would give us at least some guideline on what technology we'd want to use.
Any further discussion or questions? Representative Dodson.
Having done a few of these IT systems before, these are not the kind of elements I would look for if I was trying to prevent hacking. In other words, the technical specifications in which you develop IT programs would be the ones that would present a weakness. These are simply defining elements that rest inside the system. So having one of these word searches doesn't get you very far. So I just think in order to define what it is we want to happen, these elements are probably fundamental. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Okay, so there was some discussion on this the other day, and we did talk to some professionals and some attorneys, and it was discussed that, okay, if we take all this out and we leave it up to the board, then we could get into a jam because the board could be influenced once they're appointed. And so the professionals had told us to not try to strike all that language, but to more or less make a suggestion, kind of like including but not limited to, so that we could leave it in there as an example. Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was not at this meeting, so can you enlighten the committee as to which professionals and which attorneys you consulted?
There were several discussions with HR professionals, the interested parties that did testify in for this bill, and then the FGA was also weighed in on that because they have had they've done these systems in other states and have seen it unravel once it got to the committee level.
I don't know if I speak for other members of the committee, Mr. Chair, but I think I would find it edifying to see some of that information provided from these organizations, given the fact that some members of the committee were privy to it and we were not, just to stand up for those of us who might not have been there. If we could at least have that, and of course I'll leave that up to the carrier of the amendment, what you would like to do with that, but I think it's good for all of us to have as much information as we can. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. I'll request that information be sent to the committee if they can do so. Representative Auerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Representative Dodson took what I was going to bring up, but looking at the list, a lot of it looks like just user-friendly elements, both from the end user but also for internal use. We hear constantly that it's difficult to find the data. They don't have the data. I think this list is a good starting point to allow the department to have easy access to the data that we need. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any online questions? Representative Long.
Mr. Chairman, in an effort to clear this up somewhat, I'm wondering if I'd like to make a substitute amendment to not strike anything, just to add including but not limited to, the term including but not limited to on line 39, I believe.
Charles.
Yes, Chairman.
With Representative Long's substitute amendment, does that suffice, or does it need to be in more than one place?
I think there were probably two places where you would want that. One moment, and let me take a look where that might be. So I think one location, Chairman, would be on page 6, line 12. So, maybe read the new system shall include, but not be limited to features and benefits as defined by the Unemployment Compensation Modernization Improvement Council. That's on page 6, lines 12, right after review. So we would strike the following, and it would say the new system shall include, but not be limited to, features and benefits as defined by the Unemployment Compensation Committee. So another location would be on page 5. On page 5 at lines 40. And again, you'll see the following is in that line. So we would strike the following and we would add but not be limited to. So it would read the information technology system, technology and platform shall include but not be limited to components defined by the Unemployment Compensation Modernization and Improvement Council.
Representative Long, is that good for you? For your substitute?
Yes.
That is.
Yes, those two places, yes.
Okay. Seconded by Representative Sutton. Any discussion? Representative Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the intent behind this to kind of come to a compromise. It assuages to a certain extent my concerns about flexibility. It still does not do anything about my concerns for potentially shifting money towards companies that we know already do this, and there are only a limited number of companies in the nation that might do this. So I think that opens the state up to a lot of different things, and one reason why I think in general it is best practice not to put IT requirements into statute, no matter if they are generic or fairly benign, which I actually agree that they are. But I just, in general, I don't think we want to get into this practice going forward of continuing to put IT requirements into statute. It's a bad idea. There's a reason why in the Joint Committee on IT they go into executive session when they discuss certain things. And so while I appreciate the intent of this language, and I would actually prefer a separate standalone amendment because I think I prefer my version, but this version is better than nothing, would be my opinion.
Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, Representative, you may close.
I close.
Committee, you've heard the motion, substitute motion. All in favor, say aye. All against, say no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Any further discussion? Representative Clayton.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just want to make a firm clarification that what will be happening with this bill is that we will hold it open and we will continue to work it further on Tuesday, right? Because that's in our agenda, right?
Yes, Representative. The intent is to make changes today, if any, and have sort of a cooling off period for people to kind of let things sink in. Then Tuesday we will hear from a member of both sides of the interested parties before we reopen discussion. And then we can make more changes if needed. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm new at this. Does the passage of the Long amendment kill the Shu amendment, or can it be reoffered? Because they don't, one does not match the other, or it's not the opposite of the other.
It was a substitute motion, so it overrides the initial motion.
I understand that it overrides it, but can the original motion be reoffered as an original motion?
I believe it can.
Thank you.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your patience. A representative previously spoke to me and said that perhaps maybe some of the interested parties could get together during our cooling off period and sort of discuss this issue a little bit more. So I think we all know who those are. So I would encourage that discussion, and we can revisit this again on Tuesday. Thank you.
Yes, we've encouraged that all along, and I know there have been several meetings with all the interested parties, and even especially with Representative Johnson looking at the rate tables, several meetings. And we also had them confer on the 20-year look back as well. I haven't heard back on that, but yes, we are encouraging as much as many meetings as possible. So, Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of amendments. Charles, if you can bring up number 2.
If, Representative, you could just give me a moment to send those to Cindy.
Okay.
And Representative, you said number 2, is that correct?
Yes. Committee, what this, go ahead, Charles. Committee, what this amendment does is, there was a lot of discussion on the section where we talk about making sure that the employers are made whole, and there was one spot where it was actually written to that it would have actually made any payments that employers had made or had been made on behalf of the employers for benefits, that they would not have been held accountable for those. And this amendment just makes sure that we're talking only the fraudulent or improper payments. And Charles, if you want to elaborate, that'd be great.
Yeah, I really don't have much to add, Representative. I think because what we're adding, you'll see in the balloon there what we're adding to line 27. I think it covers the situation that lines 21 through 23 maybe were intended to cover, and does not have any unintended consequences, because that was a very broad language there. And then I guess you'll be speaking about the other changes, Representative.
Did everybody understand that?
I'm not sure what you said at the very end.
But there are a couple more changes to the balloon, and I don't know if Representative Hoffman had addressed those or not.
Yeah, are you talking about on the last page? They just make sure that it's any contributing employer, government rated employer, or reimbursing, just to make sure that we covered all of the employers. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Do we have a second on the amendment? Representative Williams? Discussion on the amendment? Representative Highland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the strikeout above where we see the balloon, is that also part of this amendment?
That is part of the amendment. That was the language that the Department of Labor pointed out that would accidentally trigger repayment of any claims for COVID, not just, the intent was to only reimburse for fraudulent claims and improper payments.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Online? Seeing none, Representative, you can close.
I close.
Committee, you've heard the amendment. All in favor, say aye. All against, say no. Motion passes. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Charles, the amendment number 1. I'm sure if you sent that one yet or not. Yeah, I think they're both sent at the same time.
No, Representative, I will be sending that one right away here.
Okay. Well, he's sending that. The chairman, well, when we were hearing this bill, he did make a statement that possibly the council itself would maybe be organized a little different than what was in the bill. And so this amendment does change changes it from an 11-member to a 13-member, and then makes some other changes as far as who are the ones that are appointing, and how many members from different communities. It adds 3 members to the employment, representatives, employers, and 3 members to employment classes as representative employees. And then it also changes, it makes sure that the minority party and the majority party have respective appointments for the council. So, and then the last would be on page 221. It makes sure that the council has to meet 30 days after the effective date of the act. So that, and Charles, if you'd like to explain a little more, that'd be great.
Charles Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman. The only thing, and maybe you mentioned the last box there about sort of a revolving leadership of the council. There's a provision, and I apologize if I didn't hear you. There's a provision that the chairpersonship of the council is going to alternate on a 2-year basis. The first chair will be the chairman of the House Commerce Committee for 2 years, and then the chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, and then it will alternate.
Yes, sorry, I forgot about that part.
Cindy, have you sent out the Hoffman Amendment number 1? I'm not showing that we've received it. In committee, I apologize for the clunkiness, I guess, for lack of a better word, of this meeting. But on a bill this large with different amendments, it would be nice if we could hand them out like we used to, but we can't do that right now. And so just try to have a little bit of patience. It's frustrating for all of us, but it's just kind of how things have to work for now. Comment on the amendment where we haven't seen the amendment or have a second yet.
Oh, it doesn't? Okay.
Representative Ralph, did you have something on the amendment?
I just had a question in regard to the amendment, just from what I could see, so I'll wait for the second.
Charles, did you send the number 1 amendment to Cindy for circulation?
Yeah, Chairman, I did.
Cindy, did you forward Charles's most recent email with amendment number 1? Charles, would you mind sending the amendment again to Cindy, amendment number 1, so she could forward that email when she receives it? Thank you. Okay, it looks like we got it. Do we have a second on the amendment? Representative Long.
I'll second.
Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Ralph, did you have discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this piece, and I'm not deep into it. So the first thing that just struck me was the appointment of members in the meeting as a shall within 30 days. Are we a little optimistic about the time frame?
We need to get it started as quickly as possible, so.
Yes, it shall, and just to kind of clear things up, this was, when we went through the bill, there were some questions about that, how they were being appointed. And I made a statement at that time. We were waiting on the Speaker Pro Tem to weigh in on it because we have a certain way that we appoint committees, and I wanted to make sure we got that right. That's what this is. It gives the governor an appointment, or a couple of appointments, and then the rest is kind of how we always do things between the Senate and the House. Representative Clayton.
Thank you. I'm looking at the amendment since we just got it. There's no sunset on this committee. I know my chamber had brought up a desire for that, so I didn't know if that would be included in this, Representative.
There's no sunset in, excuse me, there's no sunset in this amendment, but I believe that we do have a sunset coming.
Right, yeah, this just changes the makeup of the committee, and then when they are supposed to meet.
Thank you.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That magic word was mentioned, sunset, and I'm glad that's going to be brought up. But I would like to note that I was the only person that voted against removing a sunset earlier today on the floor. The sun doesn't set in Kansas, so any sunset we put in here is going to automatically be extended or deleted. Sorry, I'm cynical on that one.
Thank you for your input. Any further discussion? No. Seeing none, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. All against, say no.
No.
Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Representative Auerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the sunset, I do have an amendment for the sunset of the committee. I think it is in everybody's email. Sent out just the Auerkamp amendment.
It was sent, looks like it was sent out at 2:05 p.m. and it's Auerkamp number 1. You want to go ahead and explain it?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. There's two changes. Makes the length of the committee last 3 years after its first meeting, and then at that point it dissolves, sunsets. I think the 3 years, that gives at least the next group of House members 2 years to see how the committee's working, and also after that time they should have enough information back from the committee to see if it's worth continuing it or changing it. But I think it is important that it gets looked at again.
Yeah, so for the people that are new up here, we typically put sunsets in a bill to remind us to take a look at things. This would be, I would favor this because it'll cause us to look at it in 3 years and not only see if we need to extend it, but also see if we need to change the duties of the council. So I think that's a good amendment. Do I have a second? Representative Sutton. Sorry, Representative Clayton.
That's all right. I just wanted to say to the distinguished representative, I sure do like it when we agree. We've been doing that a lot lately. Thank you for bringing this amendment.
Any other discussion? Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick question. I guess this amendment brought up a larger overall question. So only the governor's appointee has a term limit. It was 4. This amendment changes it to 3. But no other appointee actually has a term limit to change?
The entire committee sunsets in 3 years.
I understand that, but on page 2, there's a slight change of the governor's appointee. It was 4 years, and now it changes to 3, which just brought up the question on, does nobody else have a term?
Charles, can you answer that?
Chairman, I don't believe there are any other terms specified in years.
So the reason for the change is to match the sunset, so that there's not 2 members that continue and the rest of them don't? Is that the reasoning behind that?
Yes, Chairman.
So Representative, I think the reason for the 4 years was they wanted those people to roll off and be reappointed. But because the rest is appointed by the House and the Senate. And so I think that that was so that the governor would reappoint new members. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think that's the point he was making. It looks like the other appointees here have an interminable term. Even if the majority-minority parties change, it looks like once they're appointed, there's no expiration of their term by subsequent election or any event.
Representative Auerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the previous amendment by Representative Hoffman, which changed the way the committee was formed, did that change the appointment from all being from the governor to the appointment being from the governor, and then some from the governor, some from the speaker, and some from the Senate president?
Yes, Charles, can you weigh in on that? I would imagine that the previous amendment would change some of this language.
Yes, Chairman, the previous amendment changed that the governor did not appoint those individuals. It changed the number, but there was no specific provision as to terms. There is a provision that, members who are legislatures need to be a member of the legislature to be on the council. But there's no specific limitation as to terms in that prior amendment.
But later in that paragraph, it says something about the Workers' Compensation and Employment Security Board appointing members, and I think we just struck all that and changed it to the governor and the House and Senate making appointments. So we probably need to look at that.
That's correct, Chairman.
Representative Williams.
Well, just thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the comment of term limits, many of our boards do not have term limits. Your term limit is whether or not you are reappointed or you lose your election. For example, legislative post audit, there's no term limit on that. So you could be on it forever until, like a former Senator Hensley is on there.
Well, we learned that wasn't forever, too. Close.
Chairman?
Yes, Charles.
I would point out that on page 2, line 17 to 21, and perhaps the members of the committee have already seen this, but there is that specification that legislative members shall serve during the legislative session in which they are appointed to the council. So there is a limitation as to legislators.
Okay, committee, it looks like possibly this amendment could use some more work as far as that, the paragraph with the line 7 through 16. Representative, you want to hold off on this amendment until Tuesday so we can make the proper wording? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. There wasn't a second, so we'll move on. Oh, I'm sorry, there was a second. Is that okay with the second, Representative Sutton?
Thank you for asking. Yes, it is.
Representative Highland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment, and it has been sent out. Labeled Highland number 1. Compared to the last ones, this is really simple.
Looks like this was sent out at about 2:03 p.m.
Yeah, I get mine before you do, Mr. Chairman.
2:02. Yeah, that was pretty complicated. Representative, you want to explain your amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Amendment is page 7, line 35. Having served on the Rules and Regs Joint Committee for years, one of the problems is we never put a timeline that when these rules and regs will be written. I'm putting in there they have 12 months following the effective date of this act. Rules and regs will be promulgated.
Representative Miller seconds your amendment.
Thank you.
I don't think we need any further or explanation from the revisor, so any discussion on the amendment?
There's one more part.
Oh, go ahead, sir, sorry.
The second part is on page 71, line 2, changing the effective date to the publication in the Kansas Register. With that, stand for question.
You're still good with the second? Okay. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, you may close.
I close on my amendment.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All against say no. Motion passes. Any further discussion? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have an amendment, a balloon. I think Charles has that. And I also sent Cindy a piece of that I have adapted. And I have it written too if you don't find it. Copies. Charles, do you have the amendment?
Yeah, Representative, do you want me, it sounds like you already sent it to Cindy, is that correct?
I actually want the full amendment that you have. And yes, if you could go ahead and pull that up, and then
Okay.
Cindy did a piece of it. So actually, there are 3 parts to it. If everybody can pull up that amendment, and they have it. And that would be the one that Charles made.
Representative, do you want to explain it or do you want to have?
I can explain it because that's Charles. I want the one that you made that has it.
Okay.
There's a different one. Thank you. Is everyone in the committee now? Yes, you do. Well, no, you don't. You have the audited one, the audit item, but there should be another one from Charles. It would say Williams number 1. That's it. Okay, so Charles, if you would like, you could explain the 90 days on page 4 and the 120 days on page 8, and then I'd like to do the audited ones right now.
Okay, I'm sorry, Representative, I'm having trouble hearing you. I think you wanted me to explain a portion of this. So part of this is originally in the bill, there's a deadline for
Wait
after
one
the
moment.
council.
Wait one moment. Just, yes, if you, sorry, Charles, I wasn't speaking clearly in the mic. If you could explain page 4, the 90 days, and page 8, the 120 days, and I'll do the rest.
Okay, very good, Representative. So in the original bill, there is a provision that the council has a deadline of 6 months after its first meeting to issue an initial report that at minimum describes the state of the process by which an individual files a claim for and receives benefits under the employment security law at the time the report is issued and planned improvements to the process. And then the council can also address other matters. So the deadline in the bill was 6 months for that initial report. This amendment changes that to 90 days. There was also in the original bill a deadline for the Secretary of Labor to post trust fund computations and data on the Secretary's website. That was a requirement of the bill, and the deadline was within 90 days. There was an initial period that the Secretary had to post 20 years of data within 90 days of the effective date of the act, and then additionally, 90 days after the end of each fiscal year, post data for that fiscal year. So this amendment changes that second deadline, the ongoing deadline for each fiscal year, to 120 days after such fiscal year's closing date.
Charles, so the first part of this are just changing the timeline. So when it's posted onto the website, that would be page 8, changing that to 120 days after the fiscal year, and then when the council actually provides a report, it changes from 6 months to 90 days. So that's the easy part. So Cindy has sent the auditing piece, and it's easy too, but if you pull up that, and I think you have that one. Does it say audit? Yeah.
That would be the audit language.
Well, so I do, so I know she sent it because it has everyone's names on it, so maybe refresh your computers.
247.
Did you send the audit
you're looking
one,
at the right
Cindy?
thing.
Okay. I thought you did. Technology. Let me know when you have the audit.
It's okay, guys, we'll get through this.
You have it? The audit one? If you don't, I have a copy. Anyone like it? The next piece is on the audit. We know that there's going to be an audit that will be coming out next week from Department of Labor. This is not the same type of audit. There will be some overlap, but this amendment actually has the council conduct an audit and examine the effects of the Department of Labor and the unemployment insurance system. The audit does include the ability for the auditor to receive and review confidential documents in order to conduct the investigation, which is standard practice for an auditing agency. There are 2 parts of the audit. One part, if you look at you can actually see it outlined for the audit, is to include an evaluation, or let me get that part. The scope of the audit shall include, but not be limited to, the amounts and the nature of improper payments and fraudulent claims, fraud processes and methods, and possibility of recovery of any improper payments. That's the first part. The second part is more like a forensics audit, but a forensics audit would be very costly, very expensive. It would be difficult to find an auditor that could actually do everything that we wanted. If in fact the money is overseas, it'd be very hard to trace and to actually find out specifically what happened. So instead, what it says is that the second part, instead of being the traditional forensic that follows it everywhere. It's just going to be an evaluation of whether or not data breaches were a contributing factor for any fraudulent payments. There would be a preliminary report to the council May 1st, 2022, so that gives them over a year to get a preliminary report, and then a final report by September 1st, 2022. So again, it gives you plenty of time to look at this. There is some overlap with what the state LPA is doing. And I would also tell you that not only are we having a legislative post audit next week that looks at the fraud, but we're having a longer audit that comes out in June. Neither of those two address the breach. It will not be able to tell us that. So there's going to be a little bit of overlap, but they're two different auditing agencies actually provides better information for us. So I'll stand for questions.
Do we have a second on the amendment? Representative Long. Representative Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In looking at the language and to make sure I'm at the right spot, we're talking about the language that wants to read or is proposed to read, the audit shall also include an evaluation concluding if data breaches were a contributing factor to any fraudulent payments.
Correct.
I'm wondering in there, just a suggestion on some language, the response to that evaluation could be yes or no. I'm wondering if actually what we're trying to find out is the extent to which data breaches contributed to fraudulent payments.
So one of the things when you get into a forensic audit, the extent will be difficult to get to, and it could even be a legal question, a legal determination on whether or not there's a fraud. An auditor can give you probability, but they can't give you, perhaps specifics. That would have to be proven in the court of law. But in terms of this amendment actually says, it uses those wonderful words that may include or something of that nature. Let's find it. So it says, but not limited to. The scope of the audit shall include, but not be limited to. So if the council wanted to take that second part and expand it, I think that maybe your attorney, maybe that would work.
Representative Ralph, do you have any suggestions?
No, it was just an observation at that point, but since we're having some time in between, I'll look some more. It was just a question that occurred. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Representative Clayton.
Thank you. So committee, looking at the last line of this amendment, the audit shall be paid for by the state subject to appropriations, therefore. I do have some heartburn and some concerns because we already have legislative post audit. Many esteemed members of such committee are on our committee too. And I want to make sure that we are doing this right, but this certainly seems like it might run up the costs and during a time when we should be tightening our belts. So I guess my question here would be, how much would such an audit cost, just market price? If anyone would like to speak to that, I'd be curious.
Representative, I would imagine we'd have that by the time the supplemental note came out. The Department of Revenue probably has a good answer for you. Maybe you could ask them. I don't know that anyone on this committee can opine to that, but I know the state pays for the post-audit committee to do audits as well.
Well, yes, and we already have that, so it seems awfully expensive. Sometimes I want to buy 2 handbags and I just buy 1, so, because that's what you got to do. So when I look at this, it's just, again, with concerns. We've seen some other good bills go down because we, just Christmas tree them up and it gets too expensive to pass. So if there is anything that can be spoken to in that regard, and that is where my heartburn lies.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple thoughts on that. Number one, I'm pretty sure it'll be less than 300 million. So that's a good thing. And that's how much, at the minimum, we have lost because we weren't prepared. And if we think it was just COVID, we're actually wrong about that too, because the state of Kansas had a fraud claim rate of around 17% prior to the pandemic. So we were still, I think, in the top 5 in the nation for the most fraudulent claims. And that was before anything happened. So auditing, legislative post audit is great. It's only going to be for a set period of time. Its scope is very direct. The first results that we'll receive are going to be a high view look. The second results in June are going to be more specific and detailed, as to the extent that they can do that. But this goes 1 year further. And considering the 300 plus million at minimum, even if this audit were 1 million, it would be of value to the Kansas taxpayers. And the only thing I would say is we should have done it yesterday.
All right, I will just say, though, that we don't have any money, and we should be sensible when we make these decisions. I will not support this amendment.
Representative Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a very quick question. What's the reasoning behind the timeline changes in the other part of the bill, or other part of the amendment?
Well, I think having 1 year is very important. So not knowing exactly when this will actually pass through the House, the Senate, and then again signed into law, this assures us that at least it's a year for the preliminary, and then allowing a few more months to tie up any loose ends. So that's the reasoning for that.
Any further questions on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Probst. We have one online too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, part of this includes looking at data breaches. Do we have reason to believe that are these talking about data breaches at Department of Labor?
Yes.
And do we have reason to believe there were data breaches at Department of Labor?
I think that, I'm just gonna give you one example. On KWCH TV in Wichita, they had a lady that was like 55 years old that got onto the website and she put her social security in inaccurately, and it caused the whole page to fill with people's social security numbers and claim information. She accidentally did that. She tried to tell the Department of Labor, was not able to reach them. So then she went to KWCH and was able to repeat it. So though I don't have a personal experience, I think that's one story. Another story is that many of our employers are saying that the exact wage amounts are being filed. And where would you get the exact wage amounts? So I don't have the answer to that. I don't think anyone can say it definitively. That's why the audit would look into it and say, is that, we don't have to trace we don't have to do the forensic, travel it down to, trace it to the last dollar, but overall, can we find anything?
Fair enough. Just going back to Representative Clayton's point, we are going to vote on this today and incorporate this into the bill without having any idea what it may or may not cost. Is that right?
I will say that we still don't know what all of this has cost. It would be 800 million. So again, I'm prepared and I'm happy to be accountable to those that I represent to protect their interests, because this is a tax increase, that $300 to $400 to $700 million that will have to be paid back to our unemployment fund. It will have to be paid back. So I just want to prevent it from happening again. So I don't have a fiscal note, but as the chairman said, that could easily be provided to some level.
After it's already part of the bill.
I'll remind the committee that we're going to work this bill again on Tuesday, and so if you have heartburn at that point, we can address it again. Representative Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ensure that I had a chance to speak in reference to the post audit, having, I think, the longest serving member on post audit for the years that I've been in the legislature, I will share with you that there's an opportunity for us to utilize legislative post audit to get that 5,000 level view at no cost to businesses or the state general fund or the Department of Labor's budget to determine if there is fraud and if there are a breach. And if there is a breach, then we can order an additional audit and find out where that breach occurred. But what we're dealing with here is a lot of speculation as to about what the cost will be and how much money has been gone out in fraud. I will state that, you know, my constituents too are wanting to are having issues with the Department of Labor. And I can go back a number of years, as I've stated all along, that the problem lies with the legislature and not approving the dollars to upgrade the system when we had a chance to do so, only to see it killed by back in 2012. So I might state, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for taking the time that you are on this bill and listening, but this bill is really getting heavy on the employer side. And I'm more concerned about how it's really affecting our constituents. We're loading down a bill that's going to take a while to implement. And in the meantime, we still have issues with getting those monies into the hands of our constituents. And while I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee that we need to do something to ensure that however we go about replenishing those funds, that we do it accurately and fairly. But in the meantime, we can't forget about our constituents out there that are struggling to get paid. So I might suggest, Mr. Chairman, that we, as we move forward, be mindful that the people on the end user, the ones that are waiting for their unemployment insurance, that we should be moving as quickly and as expediently as we can to get those monies to them. Whatever support the Department of Labor should need to address this, we should be doing it. We're making more of a burden through trying to amend a bill that deals with the employer side. And we know the funds are there. Let's get them out to where they belong, and let's look to see if there's some fraud. All of us are concerned about the fraud, but we have no idea where the breach occurred. And I'm here to tell you that a number of the breaches by big business across the nation and internationally have occurred. And that's probably where a lot of the information has come from. But I truly believe our post audit is quite capable. And Representative Williams is the chair of the post audit. She could draft a scope statement, and should the audit committee choose to accept that audit in the manner that she presents, we can have that information back within 5 or 6 months, ready for the committee's purview.
Any further comment, Representative Curtis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess I just want to add on to what the previous Representative Burrows had just talked about. I too kind of like the idea of our post-audit taking a look at this. I know that we heard during testimony that it was not due to a data breach that we're experiencing the issues with fraud. So I guess I would just caution that, you know, since we heard that it wasn't a data breach, that, you know, if we want to get to the root of the problem, probably that isn't the real place to focus when it comes to the fraud. So, you know, I too think that the post audit is quite capable of kind of doing an analysis and sharing information. And we're still in the middle of this. I mean, I think that's one thing that we have to recognize too, that we're still in the middle of dealing with all of this. And so I think we have to just move a little cautiously forward to make sure that we're not overburdening and making sure that we're focusing, you know, in the right direction to really get to the bottom of it. So thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to share those comments.
Representative Clayton for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just wondering if since we are obviously not closing out on debate for this bill because the hour grows late, not that I care what the Senate wants to do in here, but in any case, I had a proposal for the carrier of the amendment. Would it be all right if we perhaps, I don't know how you table an amendment, but held that so we could get just some more fiscal information, because I think we all want to be helpful and provide oversight, but, we need to provide both quality and savings. That's what we are charged to do by the people who put us here as appropriators. And so I think we'd be able to get more of a clear picture if we gave this some time.
Representative Williams.
Yeah, I would love to comment on some of the items that we've talked about, and we can do that. But out of respect for your request, that's fine. If I could withdraw the amendment for today and bring it back on Tuesday and provide you a little bit more information about what it might cost. And I can definitely do my best to get you some information to make you feel more comfortable.
Thank you so much. Allow me to express my gratitude.
Is that okay with the second? Okay, we'll talk about that on Tuesday. Any further discussion for today? We're about ready. Representative Croft, and then that'll be it for the day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a conceptual amendment, and I'm looking specifically at section 2D2. And this is reference to my comments or talk to...
What page of the bill is that on?
Sorry.
And what line number?
Thank you. Page 6. I believe it's 37, but it could be 27, depending on which version you have. It's at the end of D2. To be adding one line, and again, if it's reference to my comments and talk with the Department of Commerce the other day, and talking specifically about the work opportunity tax credit, I would just like to add that line in there. So line F would be automated work opportunity tax credit eligibility determination. I did send that to my comments to Cindy and to the reviser. I think they may have shared it around. But I would like to make that.
Okay, you want to explain what that tax credit is and how they earn it? And I think we have a 3-year backlog right now, right?
We do have a 3-year backlog.
And this would just make it, the system automatically approve that, or say they're eligible for that tax credit, so that we won't get into another tax log. Explain what the work opportunity tax credit is, please.
So what the idea of the program was, it was where those that are that are on subsistence and other programs, that is, we're trying to help them get off of this, and we're trying to move them from that program into being self-employed. This tax credit helps them in that process. It's a federal program. It's something we were talking about, and we heard the Department of Commerce talk about that the other day.
I think it also applies to prisoners when they're released.
Absolutely,
sure.
Right.
Sure. Okay. Representative Long will second that amendment. Any discussions on that? Seeing none, Representative Croft, you may close.
I close.
Committee, you've heard the amendment. You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. All against say no. Motion passes. I want to discuss tomorrow. We have the Secretary of State has 3 bills in our committee. They're bills that we heard last year. They're small changes, and so we're going to hear those bills tomorrow. I'm not expecting you to be here. We're not voting on anything. I'll be here, but if you want to, be virtual tomorrow, we're not going to make any votes on anything. So you just tune in and listen. If you have questions, we'll take them, but it should be relatively easy. So I don't want you guys, those of you who have to travel a long ways, please go home and be safe. With that, we'll adjourn until tomorrow.